Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024. Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from our ancillary bunker linked to our main freedom bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, here every Sunday for you from 2 to 5 Eastern, and also available 24/7 at davejanda.com. Extra shows, extra content, extra guests, extra analysis. Content of which I can't go into on any other platform, including on the radio, because, well, there are deep state players within the FCC, and they shut down Wham Talk 1600 in a heartbeat. If I go into depth that I do at davejanda.com, they would shut down YouTube, our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel, you name it, which is why davejanda.com is so important, and we hope you'll become part of our freedom family. Every Thanksgiving season and the Sunday before Thanksgiving, I relayed a history lesson from my mom, who was a history teacher, called The Real Thanksgiving History. I was recently going through some documents, and I came across something my mom told me when I was fighting against Hillary Care, because I believed at the time, and still do to this date, that it would decimate the healthcare provider networks and decimate the doctor-patient relationship. And she sent a note to me saying, fight the fight, Dave. Fight the fight against Hillary Care. You're doing the right thing, because what you're doing is you're taking on the government, and the government is nothing more than a drug dealer that wants to make every American a junkie. My mom was so far ahead of her time, and I was so blessed to not only have her as my mom, but as a teacher. I want to give you a heads up, because that's what my mom and dad used to do to me. If you're traveling over this holiday weekend to see family, great. I want you to be careful. Tomorrow, I think there are going to be some significant issues at airports around our country, because the Biden-Harris thugocracy, they're instituting their federal employee mandates, and according to contacts I have in the Department of Homeland Security, 40% of the employees at the TSA are unjabbed, and they will report to work, but they will probably be sent home, and that's going to cause significant problems. And most people would say, though, Biden and Harris, they don't want this to happen. No, actually they do, and their handlers want this to happen. Because what this is about with this totalitarian regime is chaos. You know, common sense would tell you that the less chaos, the better. Well, with this thugocracy, the more chaos, the better. Because the more chaos leads to more people falling into line and becoming sheeple. And the more chaos they can create, the more control they have over you, because the vast majority of people, when they encounter chaos, they become paralyzed. You see, the goal of this show since its outset has been to create a parallel structure for you in how you think about freedom and how you react to the globalist syndicate, the New World Order crowd, the deep state, the totalitarian thugocracy, whatever you want to call it. It's about creating parallel structures. We do that on the financial side, as Rob Kirby just spoke about, as Adriana Reed earlier today spoke about precious metals. We spoke to Dr. Mike Rechtenwald today about alternative forms of education, such as through AmericanScholars.com. You hear about We the People Processing, that if you have a business and you are this way, you don't have to rely on the bankster controlled credit card system, that you can go through an alternative form of payment with PatriotSwitch.com, utilizing their services of buying from smaller businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that are American companies, so that you're not feeding the beasts of the globalist companies. These are alternatives to creating a parallel structure, and so is DaveJanda.com for your information side of the equation. A quote sent to me recently, and it blends into what we're going to discuss about the real Thanksgiving story. If there was a barnyard election, the pigs would always vote for the person that feeds them, even though he is the same person that's going to slaughter them someday. That, folks, is socialism, communism, globalism defined. When we look back over this country, over the past number of decades, there's been a push for programs that have a basis in socialism, in communism, in globalism. A recent example of that is this recent push for universal basic income, which applies to everyone, not just a targeted group, but to everyone. You see, it goes back to my mom's statement. The government is a drug dealer. Their drug, they have a number of drugs. Yeah, kind of appropriate even now about them pushing their jab and their mandates for their drug. But their drug has also been their currency, their money system. And it wants you to get addicted to it and to become a junkie. Yeah, just sit back. Don't look for a job. Just sit back. Sit on the couch. Don't. Just watch our TV, with the ads brought to you by Pfizer. Just watch our TV. Watch the news propaganda. Fall in line, sheeple, and become a junkie. That's what it's all about, folks. And in this day and age, they don't want you to know the real history behind our country, because if you did, you might not fall in line. And that's where my mom, the history teacher, steps in when it comes to the real Thanksgiving story. I came home from first grade. My mom said, "Hey, what'd you do?" "Oh, there was a play about Thanksgiving." "What was the play about?" "Oh, it was about the Native Americans, the Indians, and the Pilgrims, and they worked together, and they ended up having this feast, and it was great, and everybody did great, and Dave, that's a great story, but it's a story. It's not what really happened. That's a fable. Now let's sit down and talk about the real Thanksgiving story. This was written actually recently by Richard Mayberry, called The Great Thanksgiving Hoax. And it was the same story and same history lesson Ruth Janda gave her son, who had just come home from first grade that November day. Let me read what Richard has written. The official story is nothing like what really happened. It's a fairy tale, a whitewashed, sanitized collection of half-truths which divert attention away from Thanksgiving's real meaning. The official story has the Pilgrims boarding the Mayflower, coming to America, and establishing the Plymouth Colony in the winter of 1620 to 1621. This first winter is hard, and half the colonists die. But the survivors are hardworking and tenacious, and they learn new farming techniques from the Indians. The harvest of 1621 is bountiful, and the Pilgrims hold a celebration and give thanks to God. They are grateful for the wonderful new abundant land he has given them. The official story then has the Pilgrims living more or less happily ever after, each year after repeating the first Thanksgiving. Other early colonies also have had hard times at first, but they soon prosper and adopt the annual tradition of giving thanks for this prosperous new land called America. The problem with this official story is that the harvest of 1621 was not bountiful, nor were the colonists hardworking or tenacious. 1621 was a famine year, and many of the colonists were actually lazy thieves. In the history of Plymouth Plantation, the governor of the colony, William Bradford, reported that the colonists went hungry for years because they refused to work in the fields. They preferred instead to steal food. He said the colony was riddled with corruption, end quote, and with, quote, confusion and discontent, end quote. The crops were small because, quote, much was stolen both by night and day before it became scarce eatable, end quote. But in subsequent years, something changed. The harvest of 1623 was different. Suddenly, quote, instead of famine, now God gave them plenty, end quote. In fact, in 1624, so much food was produced that the colonists were able to begin exporting corn. So what exactly happened? Well, after the poor harvest of 1622, wrote Bradford, quote, they began to think how they might raise as much corn as they could and obtain a better crop, end quote. They began to question their form of economic organization. This had required that, quote, all profits and benefits that are got by trade, working, fishing, or any other means were to be placed in the common stock of the colony, and that all such persons as are of this colony are to have their meat, drink, apparel, and all provisions out of the common stock, end quote. Person was to put into common stock all he could and take out only what he needed. Sounds a lot like socialism, doesn't it? Yeah. This form, each according to his ability, to each according to his need, was an early form of socialism, and it is why the Pilgrims were starving. Bradford writes that, quote, young men that are most able and fit for labor and service complained about being forced to, quote, spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children, end quote. So the young and the strong refused to work, and the total amount of food produced was never adequate. To rectify this situation in 1623, Bradford abolished socialism. Yeah. You didn't learn this in school? No. Is anyone learning this at any level of the educational system today? No, folks, they're not. So to rectify this situation in 1623, Bradford abolished socialism. He gave each household a parcel of land and told them they could keep what they produced or trade it away as they saw fit. In other words, he replaced socialism with a free market that was the end of the famines. Many early groups of colonists set up socialist states, all with the same terrible result. At Jamestown, established in 1602, out of every shipload of settlers that arrived, less than half would survive their first 12 months in America. Most of the work was being done by only 1/5 of the men, the other four-fifths choosing to be parasites. In the winter of 1609 to 1610, the, quote, starving time, end quote, the population fell from 500 to just 60. Then the Jamestown colony was converted to a free market, and the results were every bit as dramatic as those at Plymouth. In 1614, Colony Secretary Ralph Hammer wrote that after the switch there was, quote, plenty of food which every man by his own industry may easily and doth procure, end quote. He said that when the socialist system had prevailed, quote, we reap not so much corn from the labors of 30 men as 3 men have done for themselves now, end quote. Before these free markets were established, the colonists had nothing for which to be thankful. But after free markets were established, the resulting abundance was so dramatic that the annual Thanksgiving celebrations became common throughout the colonies. And in 1863, Thanksgiving became a national holiday. Thus, the real reason for Thanksgiving, deleted from the official story, is the following: socialism does not work. The one and only source of abundance is free markets. And we thank God we live in a country where we can have them. That from Richard Marbury. And also, it was the same lesson passed on to Ruth Janda, to her first grade son. And yet again reinforced to her much older son when he was fighting for free market health care rather than socialized health care under the banner of Hillary Care. When she wrote me that note, keep fighting Hillary Care, Dave, because the government is nothing more than a drug dealer and wants to make you a junkie. It wants to addict you to their fiat money that has nothing backing it up. They want you to be addicted to their next booster of money. Does that sound familiar to what they're trying to do? You see, they changed the game, right? You take this jab. Hey, guess what? Hey, take the jab, and guess what? You're what did Fauci say in February 2021? Oh, you're protected for life. Oh, don't worry about. Oh, you're good. Now it's, well, you know, it's going to be every year. It's going to be every 6 months. It's going to be every 3 months. It's going to be every 2 months. It's until you get your next booster, whether it might be a jab or it might be a monetary injection. As I mentioned, they keep pushing this concept, of universal basic income. Isn't that what that whole coronavirus relief package was all about? Recurrent stimulus? To be addicted? To be dependent? On the very entity that's now trying to take people's jobs away from them? Well, you see, if you take people's jobs away from them, you make them dependent. Easier to create junkies, isn't it? But here's what the deep state, the syndicate, is not counting on. The very people that prospered and lived in Plymouth Colony and in Jamestown are still alive today. They're still around. And you hear them. The media doesn't want you to hear them, but they're around. Listen to this mom from San Diego taking on the drug dealers, the government, the people that want to make you a junkie. Derek, hit it.
Rooted Wings on Instagram. Nathan Fletcher, I tagged the heck out of you, so I'm sure that you are very familiar with me. Jim Desmond, thank you for your work. Wilma Wooten, this is also directed at you along with Nathan Fletcher. America is not a hospital. California is not a hospital. San Diego, it's not a hospital. This is a constitutional republic that guarantees protection of individual freedom and liberty and due process. This applies to our individual pursuits of medical interventions and health practices. San Diego is not a hospital floor that we collectively have checked into that subjects all patients to equitably prescribed medical care with no due process. Our Constitution does not secure for government power to impose forced equity in medical mandates and interventions or the power to punish carte blanche. There are 3.338 million people in San Diego County, 3,811 people who have died with COVID. Of those, 96%, 3,652 had comorbidities with hypertension, diabetes, cardiac disease accounting for the top three. Median age 77. That is a total fatality rate of 0.1%. 3.338 million people. That is a clear affinity for a specific vulnerable age and health demographic with majority fatalities prior to available treatment options and prevention. 91% of San Diegans, 60-69, received the injection. 98%, 70-79, received the injection. We remove consent from treating us like we are patients in a hospital ward. We are done. The consent of the governed is removed. We will not comply. We do not consent. Nathan Fletcher, you are on notice. We will constitutionally remove all petty tyrants beginning now.
Well, she would give William Bradford a run for his money in Plymouth Colony, wouldn't she? You see, what is she saying? Don't accept the status quo. Don't accept what these drug dealers in government are trying to push at you. Take matters in your own hands in the sense that take control of your freedom and your liberty. Doing it pretty peacefully. That was a peaceful protest on her behalf. There are a tremendous number of patriots that are standing up that they don't want you to know about. Here's another example. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long in the military. She grounded 4,000 Air Force personnel because she was concerned about the government drug dealers that were saying, essentially, accept famine. Just deal with it. There's no other alternative. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, another patriot. Derek hit it.
With respect to aviation safety, risk communication is critical. I saw 5 patients in clinic, 2 of which presented with chest pain, days to weeks after vaccination, and were subsequently diagnosed with pericarditis and worked up to rule out myocarditis. The 3rd pilot had been vaccinated and felt like he was drunk, chronically fatigued within 24 hours after vaccination. The pilot told me he didn't know what to do, so he drank a lot of coffee to try and, quote, wake himself up, and continued to fly until he realized it wasn't going away. After I reported to my command my concerns that in one morning I had to ground 3 out of 3 pilots due to vaccine injuries, the next day my patients were canceled, my charts were pulled for review, and I was told that I would not be seeing acute patients anymore, just healthy pilots there for their flight physical.
Folks, this is what the deep state, the thugocracy, the New World Order crowd, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, this is what they fear. They fear that you, if you will, go back to what happened in Plymouth Colony and in Jamestown and look at a situation and say, no, I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm not going to accept death. I'm not going to accept your drugs. I'm not going to accept what you're pushing at me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work with our communities, our local communities, and build those communities through the state and through the entire country. And we are going to address the issue so that we maintain our life, our health, and our freedom. And we're not going to rely on government and the government drug dealers that are intent on making us all junkies. The real history of Thanksgiving is perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice